Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, Our New Narrative. And today we're going to come to you with the main event, something I wish could happen, but, you know, I don't think it'll ever happen. But, hey, before we get into this, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And we want to get this content out to as many people as possible because it's important that you and I know the truth, because the truth shall set you free, as they say, and it's going to piss a lot of people off. So let's just get right to it today, and I'm going to bless you guys with an appearance from the man, the GOAT, the GOT, Dr. Thomas Sowell.
I think we're talking at cross purposes. On the one hand, we're talking about results that we're hoping for. On the other hand, we're talking about processes that we're setting in motion. You're saying, should we hope for certain kinds of lessening of inequality and so on? The real question, the political question is, shall we set in motion certain processes because we hope for that? And do those processes enhance or reduce freedom? And I think the argument that Milton is making, certainly the argument that I would make, is that the attempt at doing these things, and it doesn't really matter. It's a complete straw man to talk about absolute inequality.
Yes,
not at all.
It is. No. Absolutely. Throughout the film, this is the straw man he brings up in order to say how ridiculous to have absolute equality. And then he goes on to say how ridiculous to have absolute
homogenization as a result, you see, that you set up processes whose end result may not be any more or less inequality than exists now. But the question is, those processes may indeed reduce freedom greatly. I would go beyond the question of equality and put it more generally, that any process to ascribe any status to any group of people, equality, inferiority, superiority, must necessarily reduce freedom, because whatever the government wishes to ascribe to any group, whatever place, to use the phrase that was very common in the South, that blacks should have their place, whatever place the government is going to assign to people, that place will not coincide, that place will not coincide either with what all those people are doing or with how others perceive all those people, because there's too much diversity among human beings. To maintain any system of ascribed status from the top is going to mean reducing people's freedom across the spectrum. That's the point.
People have an ascribed status. It isn't as if government, by its intervention, creates it. People are born into this world in a given sector of a society, and many of them are born at the bottom of the society. The argument about equality of results was an argument that was linked to equality of opportunity. People recognized that unless there was a degree of equality in a degree of enough food, enough security, access to education, unless these things were available to all children, then equality of opportunity was merely a mockery. That's why equality of results became an issue, and it became an issue for black people in the United States, and they expressed their concern, whatever the opinion.
You expressed it, damn it, look. No, they did not. They did not.
Now, this was filmed a while back, as you can tell by the lack of resolution in the video and the style of clothing. But the argument is old, man. It's an old argument. And it's a socialist argument, right? And again, if you've been watching, if you've been coming back to if you've been paying attention to me, I've been trying to tell people that, hey, there's a good and a bad to socialism. There was a good and a bad to slavery, right? And the good of socialism is the security. The bad of slavery, the good of slavery was the security. The bad of socialism is the lack of freedom. The bad of slavery is the lack of freedom. Socialism is the science of slavery. Socialism is slavery without the whip, according to pro-slavery people back during the pre-Civil War days, right? So what she's saying is, look, equality, everybody needs to be equal, right? Well, okay, everybody in communism is equal. Do you want communism? Right. So, no, you don't. And here's the game. The socialists are using black people, right, as a Trojan horse. All these policies to, hey, the black people need our help. you know, we need to help everybody, especially the Black people. So let's bring in these policies to help the Black people and everybody else, to make the Black people equal to the white people. What all they're doing is trying to push in socialist policies. You know what those socialist policies have done? They've destroyed Detroit, Michigan, which used to be this capitalist beacon, you know, where you can get somebody, like I said, you can get somebody who graduated from high school and could support a family of 5 or 6, stay-at-home wife, on one salary, right? And now Detroit is bombed out and depleted in some places, right? So that's what socialism gets you. And what the socialists do is blame racism. Detroit is bad because of the racist people. Ain't no racist people in Detroit. It's just a bunch of Black people, right? So not to say Black people can't be racist. So with that said, we're going to move on to the new version of this argument.
I'm Dr. Robin Diangelo, and my work focuses on the question of what does it mean to be white in a society that proclaims race meaningless, yet is profoundly separated by race. And to start this off, I want to draw your attention to the fact that I'm white. So just look at me for a moment, think about it, notice it. And part of being white is that it's a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. And it's taken me many, many years to be able to draw people's attention to my race and see any significance in it. And that's because as a white person, I was socialized to see race as what they had. I was just a
You know, this sounds like a Whites Anonymous meeting, right? There's probably a 12-step program for your whiteness.
I was just a white bread, a Heinz 57. I didn't have race. I was socialized to see race as individual acts of discrimination and prejudice, individual acts that anybody could do to anybody else.
Which is AKA agency, right? We're all kids back in the day. If you had, you know, if you grew up in the urban setting and you're around my age, you probably grew up with some people who didn't look like you. And you didn't care until somebody taught you to care. And even then, you had to act, right? You had to act on it.
And if you did those acts, you were a bad person. And that is why, since I saw myself as a good person, I didn't see myself as connected to racism, and certainly didn't see myself as connected to race. In other words, I didn't have a sense of a racial identity. Today, I understand that I move through the world always and most particularly as a white person. I have a white frame of reference, and I have a white experience.
So what does that mean to you? So white is monolithic. All white in this context means is you're not a minority. That's all it means. Because how does she know what my experience is or your experience is? As a white person, you know, did you grow up with millionaire parents? Did you grow up in the holla? Did you grow up on a farm somewhere? Did you grow up in Manhattan? Right? You're just white.
And part of being white is to have that be invisible to us and to be able to live our lives without ever acknowledging that, to see that as non-operative. I now understand racism as a system, as a deeply embedded system, a system that our country was founded on.
False. This is the most dangerous narrative out there, man. The title of this show is, you know, Our New Narrative, Broke Capitalist. And I've noticed this narrative later in life. And it's a racist narrative. It's a white supremacy narrative or white supremacist narrative. America was not founded on racism. It just wasn't. That is totally false. And this is not an assumption, right? You had people who may not have liked other people, right? But there was no systematic racism in 1776. Why? Because there just wasn't. Okay, it just wasn't. And if she, and I dare say she never read the court case I'm about to allude to, but there's plenty of evidence in U.S. history that we are not taught because it doesn't fit the narrative, where you had people of African descent in the colonial days participating in government, right? For example, in the Dred Scott case, you go to the last dissenting opinion where I think it's Justice McLean, I believe, states that in order to find out if the Constitution had people of African descent in mind, all you had to do was go back to 1776 and see who voted to ratify the Constitution. And in 5 of the 13 colonies, Blacks who had qualified for the franchise could vote to ratify the Constitution. Now, is that systematic racism? No, it's not. Did America have a system called slavery? Yes, it did. Was that unique to America? No, it wasn't. Slavery is as old as written language, right? And was certain people who look like this enslaving other people who look like that unique to America? No. If they actually read this thing, you know what? I was telling somebody the other day, I discovered something. I don't know if y'all know about it, but it's called a book, right? If she read a book that wasn't pandering to her preconceived notions, she would know that there was a thing called white slavery, white Christian slavery, where millions of white people were enslaved by people who didn't look like them, right? So let's go on.
That all our institutions were created out of. And every institution reinforces this system. And it's a system of unequal power. So let me give you an example. Women in the United States got the right to vote in 1920. And there was only one possible way that we could have gotten the right to vote, and that was for men to give it to us, because we literally were not sitting in the seats of institutional power.
Glad you mentioned that, because it's such a disingenuous argument, because she's inferring that women, she's going to go on to infer that women were basically kind of held down by men, evil men. They didn't want women to vote. They wanted them in the kitchen, right? She doesn't mention the fact that most men didn't have the right to vote in what we consider America until close to the I believe it was North Carolina, who was the last state to throw out universal suffrage for men, white men, right? But before that, you had to be a white property owning male to vote, right? Come on, let's put this in context. Every time you don't get something someone else has, it doesn't mean the person who has it is evil. You know when they do that? To try and get political gain. So I'm gonna go back to Dr. Thomas Sowell, how he got upset with that woman because that woman is doing what this woman is doing. Basically, they're taking some BS argument, right, and trying to say, we're trying to help the Blacks. Well, all they're doing is trying to usher in socialist policies. So socialism, again, yeah, everybody's equal, everybody's taken care of, right? But so were the slaves, folks. If you were a productive slave, you had food, clothes, shelter, right? From the day you're born to the day you die, and the master gave it to you, right? If you were a productive slave for 40 years, and now you can't go out in the fields anymore, until you died, the slave owner had to take care of you. And what if the slave owner went broke? Well, you got sold and some other slave owner took care of you. So now, instead of it being a slave owner as the individual, they just trying to get the state to do it. And they trying to do this in our name. So if you guys got anything out of this, oh, and before I let you go, speaking of that book, the book I was talking about, here's another thing about voting, right? They always attach, the narrative is blacks didn't have the right to vote, and they put up all these hurdles for, you know, to keep blacks from voting. So there wasn't a single person in America who could vote, you know. Okay. I'm about to read you something that you're not going to hear in school. So I'm not making light of the fact that blacks couldn't vote in the South during Jim Crow era. Not making light of that at all. You got to put things in perspective, because without the perspective, you get this BS argument being pushed onto us. And now you got the people who believe in this stuff burning up Portland and Seattle, setting fires. You're going to hear about this in a couple of weeks, setting fires up and down the I-5 corridor and blaming it on global warming. It's a dangerous game, y'all. So here, in 1876, wrote an old gentleman to a newspaper 50 years later, I stood in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and saw white youth after white youth turned away from the polls because they could not read or write. While consistently admitted to the ballot, couldn't read or write. Neither can I, apparently. While my horse boy and other Negroes taught by Northern teachers were consistently admitted to the ballot. And I swore an oath that so long as my head was hot, I should never cease from fighting for schools until every white child born in the state had at least the surety of a common school education and a chance to go as much further as he liked, end quote. Now, this is Out of the Mind of the South by W.J. Cash, and it was written in, just so you guys can go find is 1941, okay? So look, that goes against your narrative. That's why you never heard of it. So look, the Northerners came down to the South to help the poor whites and the Negroes. But according to her, America was founded on racism. It's all about racism. So I'm gonna end it there. Just know, be careful, find a book, read it. If you want to know what happened back then, read a book that was written back then. Hey, please like, share, and subscribe. Hope to see you soon. Leave some comments below and check out the description. I'll put some links in there to this book and my book, books now. All right. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for stopping by.